Hey everyone, welcome to the Hold My Crown podcast.
Yeet.
This is Daniel, by the way. I'm Nia.
Oh, hi. Hi, it's Danny Bucco here.
Danny Bucco. I love that in this podcast, like the Hold My Crown kind of theme of it is like, let's take that crown off and talk about the real and talk about the behind the scenes and like have it raw and vulnerable and all of that. So we're doing that today. We actually, I think, way before we had a podcast on our YouTube channel, we have talked a bit more about our backgrounds and how we grew up and all of that. But we're going to dive into it today. It does kind of tie into just like themes. So I figured we could share a little bit more of just our personal backgrounds and stories of how we were raised. And if you don't know, you're about to know. It was very different. We have literally like, what is it? Water and milk? No.
Water and
Oil
milk,
and milk.
oil and water.
Oil and water. Wow. I don't know why I'm thinking milk. Yin yang.
Because you got milk getting pumped in those tatas for the baby.
So
producing milk.
Oil and water, yin and yang are the way that we were raised was so different for so many reasons. And I do think the way that we're raised made us who we are today, for good or for worse or whatever. And so I think it's important to kind of share that. And I think a lot of people will relate to both of the ways that we were raised. People will relate to the way that you were raised and have similar backgrounds.
Right.
And people will absolutely relate to the way that I was raised. And so I think a lot of people will connect to this. And I also want to have some good takeaways, what we've learned from the way that we were raised and how it affects our life and how we choose to be the best people that we can be based off of like what we experienced, good and bad growing up. So I'd love a quick little overview, just kind of as the intro, but then we'll really dive into it, of kind of your background. We'll start with you and then I can share as well, but like childhood, the way that your parents decided to parent you, like the kind of their overall approach and how it shaped who you are.
Yeah. I am number 3 out of 4 children. So my sister's the oldest. I have an older brother and a younger brother. My father still is a pastor, and my mother was fully on staff as well for, 40 years now. So our upbringing was a lot in the church, but it was a Christian non-denominational church. No fire and brimstone. It was all about the love of Jesus, the love of God, treat others how you want to be treated, and just all about community and, coming together in that way, in a positive way, spiritually. So we pretty much grew up in the church, and we could literally walk there from our house. My dad made, I think, $25,000-$30,000 a year, when we were growing up. But also the house that he bought, that was a very big house with a very large yard. He bought for like $65,000, and it was huge. Yeah, huge.
Kind of Victorian style, right? I love the style of it. Yeah, huge yard,
massive yard. Yeah. We ended up getting a pool and a deck, later in my
And you didn't
years.
mention, but you're from the Midwest.
I'm from a small town called Three Rivers, Michigan. It is in the southwest part of Michigan.
Can I say something that just came to my mind? And tell me if I got it wrong. 3 rivers, 2 brothers, 1 sister. Is that what Jazz always says?
Yes.
Okay, it's an inside joke.
And
but,
Evan.
What?
And Evan.
Oh, and Evan.
Yeah.
Yes, 2 of our very good friends, Jazz and Evan.
Yes.
It's anytime Daniel says 3 rivers, he's like 3 rivers, 2 brothers, 1 sister, and it's just like
I think there was
a
more
bro thing.
There was just more that went to it as well.
Yeah.
He was like, we should make a cartoon about this.
Yeah.
That'd be funny. So yeah, growing up, it was like, it was all love. I mean, life wasn't perfect, but like I never heard my parents have arguments or fights or, it was almost like it was too much love. I remember like playing sports and making mistakes or feeling like I had a bad game, and my dad would say, "You were awesome out there. I can't believe how good you did." He only saw like put light on just the positive things in life. It
Words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation.
Your whole childhood.
Yeah. Obviously having siblings, we would fight a lot, and having 3 boys. He would let us, get those things out by having like wrestling matches or boxing and like things like that.
I think it's kind of wild. I mean, I get it, but also the fact that you guys would put on blow up like boxing mitts.
Yeah.
And literally duke it out in the living room. These are the stories I've heard. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Like if I had 3 boys, I don't think I would encourage physical aggression to get out your troubles.
It always ended with someone hurt and in tears.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every single time.
Because that's
someone
how siblings
would drop
are
the
anyway.
gloves. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then he would break it up. But I think that was good. Like, it shaped like, we got to be boys and we got to like get this testosterone out or anything that's like
boys
building
do
up
have a lot of energy to get
whatever.
out. Yeah.
And so those are the types of things that we did. We didn't have much. We would play like these games where he would have a broom and we would like had a circle thing from our kitchen to our living room to our family room, and we would run around and he'd have a broom going like this, and we'd have to jump over it, and like we played porky tag, which was porky.
Does not sound good.
A porcupine dog toy. And it would be freeze tag. And we'd have all my friends over. And they're like, when can we play porky tag? And my dad would just chuck these things at us. And if we got hit, we would freeze. And then someone would have to come get us and, whatever.
So you made fun out of what you had. It wasn't all about all the physical, like material stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, my dad, he'd say things like, it was just so much love. He would, I'll never forget this, and I've said this to so many people. He had said to me, he said, no matter what you do in life, I can never love you less.
Mm.
Every mistake that you make, every problem that you may have, I love you unconditionally, not by condition. Yeah. So, having that being instilled in me, I'm getting kind of emotional talking about it, but at a young age was so important. Also, just communication at a very young age. My parents were very in tune with handling conflict.
Yeah.
And saying, this is what we do. We're going to sit together, and one person is going to talk, say what they're offended about or what they're hurt about. The other is not going to talk. They're going to listen. After they're done, they're going to repeat back to them what they said, so that person knows they're heard, and then that person can then share why they were hurt.
Yeah.
And always end in resolution and hugging it out. So those types of things.
They had high emotional intelligence in their communication.
Yes.
And all of that.
Yes. At the same time, we were disciplined. We were spanked. I think, a lot of people can relate with that generation. It was never done out of anger, though.
Yeah.
My dad would always say, this is why we're doing this. Yeah. And if we knew we did something wrong before Dad got home, we would go and put 10 pairs of underwear on. And he had this paddle made.
Oh, my God.
And that was carved into it, wisdom.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually seen that paddle. It's hanging on the wall.
So we would have to hang over a chair. He would spank us, and then he would hug us, even if we were crying, and saying, I don't enjoy doing this, but this is how we're going to discipline. Yeah. And I'm doing it out of love. Yeah. And I love you. So
I feel like most of our generation, as far as I know, was spanked. Like any friends or anybody that I talked to, like spankings were part of like younger childhood as like discipline. So kind of, I think I might make mine a little shorter because I have a lot that I really want to dive into. Go. But my childhood, so you were raised in the Midwest, your mom and dad were together, they loved each other, they communicated well. One thing I will say before anything else about my family or my upbringing is I do truly believe that families and parents, for the most part, do the best with what they know. And, their parents' ceiling, their parents' absolute best is their starting point. And for the next generation, and that's your floor, and you do your best when you're raising your kids. So I know that my dad was raised in a very military family where there was a lot of discipline, maybe more discipline than I think kids should have. It was very strict, very like hard line on everything. And so my dad, I think he did his best with what he knew to like be even better than what he was raised in. And same with my mom. I feel like she had a different upbringing and she did her best. So I just want to preface everything with that because I am going to do my best to just be open about my childhood, and there was ups and downs. But I do think that my parents did the very best that they could with what they had and what they knew. Like they are always trying to be the best, and they loved me very much, and I know that. So I was raised for a bit in the beginning of my childhood in Northern California and like Sacramento, Rockland area. My dad worked at Folsom State Prison after he got out of the military. So he was a correctional officer at Folsom and then transferred to another prison later in life. And then he was a sergeant at the next prison that he worked at. So you can kind of imagine.
Not a very stressful job.
Yeah, not a very stressful job.
Jeez,
not a very like
Louise.
not ever having to have your wall up and be like on guard at all times.
Crazy.
Yeah, craziness. So that was like he went from a military family to joining the military to, I mean, he had a deployment and then he came back, and when he left the military, he worked at a prison, and one of the most like dangerous prisons in California, like top 5 most dangerous prisons in California.
In like the country, I think.
Yeah, definitely up there in the country as well. So that's my dad's kind of like background, and then my mom's a whole nother story. But one of the things I will say about how I was raised is I always knew I was loved, but I definitely knew that there was like stricter like rules and discipline and all of that growing up. So my parents got divorced or they separated first when I was 6 years old. I think by the time I was like 7, almost 8 is when like the divorce was finalized. But from that point in my life, I was bouncing around so much. My mom and I, and my brother, when she first left, we slept in tents in people's backyards. And like, again, your parents do the best that they can with what they have, because my mom would try to make it fun.
Right.
Oh, we're gonna be camping in our friend's backyard, or we're gonna sleep on the couch at our friend's house. And it was often her friends that had kids my age. So like I would have someone to play with or be around. I have very like little flashes of memories of the women's shelter that we were at, because you can bring kids with you to the women's shelter. I remember I lost one of my favorite dolls, and that was like traumatizing, because it's like when you don't have much with you. You have like the clothes in a suitcase, and you don't have much else, and it's like your one like thing of comfort, and it's gone. Like, and I remember the room and the space that we were in and all of that. And I just,
how old were you?
Like 6 years old.
6 years old.
It was around kindergarten.
Wow.
There's two ways I think about it. Took me out of my like safe little bubble world where we like lived in a house as a happy family, and I had friends across the street, like my best friend growing up, and had my school, and it took me out of all that. But also as a child, children are resilient, and it's kind of like it's all that you know. Like I didn't know any different. Like this is just what was happening. My mom was always positive, and like even though she had things where her and my dad didn't get along, there was conflict in their marriage, and they just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. She never spoke negatively of him, and she always said like, you're the apple of your father's eye. Like she always kept everything positive. So I feel like I learned a lot of strength and resilience from my mom in that season of life. And then from there, we lived with I've lived in so many houses. It's crazy. I think I counted one time, and it was like I've lived in 19 places by the time I was 21 years old.
Wow.
Because, and not even counting the couches and the backyards and the women's shelter, like the actual places I've lived. So maybe it was 18, but it was up there. So we lived with my aunt and uncle in their house, but then they were, and this is out of state. So we left the state, lived with my aunt and uncle. Then they were moving. So we lived with my mom's. I'm not even going to get into it. It's some older lady that's part of our family, Grandma Ann. And we lived with her for a little bit, and her dog that had really bad gas. That was like my biggest memory from that. I'm like, that dang dog, keep it outside. And then we moved into their new house, and then we came back. And then at that point, my mom was able to get a job and like save up money, because she was a stay-at-home mom. So that's why we were in a women's shelter and on couches, because she didn't really have any of her own finances at the time when she first left and brought us with her. So we come back, she has an apartment, then my dad has to sell the house and he has an apartment. So we're just like bouncing around. All this is within 2 years. I remember going to, and I'm getting way more into details than I wanted to, but I remember in second grade, my dad, I have a lot of memories of my dad taking me to school for some reason in second grade, but at the end of the year, and I'm not going to get emotional today, but I remember when my mom left, she didn't have a lot of resources in California, and she had family in Washington State, and that was the place where she could go and like live with her mom and her sister, or was in the area, and like get a job. There was like a job lined up, trying to get back on her feet. One, I remember, I don't know if I've ever cried that much in my entire life, because like your mom is leaving you when you're 8 years old, and I don't like the words. I don't like how that sounded, like your mom was leaving you. I don't like those words, but like she needed to go to a place where she could get on her feet, and my dad had gotten custody through the court's ruling, and that's a whole nother
of you and your brother.
Sorry, of me and my brother. Yeah. But I remember at the end of my second grade year, it was probably like the last few weeks of school, and the teacher had said something, and I laughed or I smiled, and she was like, "Nia, I've never seen you smile." I was like, "Oh
no."
I just can't imagine like if that was my kid.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Who like has been through so much.
Yeah.
And then like another adult has acknowledged like, "I've never seen you smile."
Yeah.
You know. So it was a rough time. I'm gonna pull it together. Yeah. So that was that part of the childhood. But again, my dad, because it was a weird transition from like I was with my mom when like she left him, and we were together a lot, and then we came back to California, and we're between being with my mom and my dad, and then he gets custody. So now we're like, okay, now we're full time with dad, but we know he works a lot, and so it was just like so much change in such a little amount of time, and especially for young children. I remember my grandfather, who in my dad's life was the disciplinarian, he came up to be like our full-time like Manny, like our, you know, he would watch us when my dad would work 12, 16-hour shifts at the prison and wasn't home to watch us. So my grandfather would watch us. And
where was your Oma? She was working?
She was working. She was working in the hospital. She was echo tech. So she had to stay and do her job. My grandfather was already retired from the Army.
Got you.
At the time. So he came up to help us in that like transitional period. And then eventually we moved to Southern California. Multiple houses in Southern California, multiple houses with my mom in Washington when she finally got on her own feet, got her own place, and then moved around as well. So I've lived in a lot of places, ups and downs, and that's only until like 9 years old. And I won't get into all the details, but that's kind of like the rocky part, I would say. And there's so much more outside of even childhood. But again, I just want to reiterate, I've always known I'm so loved by my family. But there was just different ways that we were raised. My mom was so into communication. And my dad, I think, just didn't have like a knowledge of like
know how to
that type of communication that's really healthy. You know, I want to say this because I feel like people will relate to this. Some people out there, especially people coming from military families, there's all those little like quotes and phrases that you might have heard if you're our age in your childhood, where if like your dad doesn't or mom doesn't think you should be crying for whatever reason, you're sad about someone took your toy or something, and it's like, oh, you want to cry? I'll give you a reason to cry. Like that sounds, it sounds so harsh now being a parent and looking back on it, but I swear I heard that all the time in my childhood. and let me tell you, there wasn't like follow through. It was more of a like, hey, we're in a public place, you better keep it together kind of thing, you know? But it was just like, you need to act right kind of situation. Did your parents ever say that to you?
No.
Oh, there's a lot of, you know, little moments. And Dad, I hope you're not listening, but if you are, I love you very much. My dad and I have a great relationship.
Yeah, you guys do.
We're in such a like really great place.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for my dad, and he's incredible, and he's great with kids and our kids. And he's wonderful. But there's definitely been some ups and downs. I remember I am a strong personality at times. And I remember when I was little, my dad was like, there's a chance we're going to butt heads a lot as I'm raising you because we're both really strong personalities. And he just would talk to me like, not like I was 8 years old. Like he was like, no, this is how it is. And I remember one time saying like, I was so sad about a birthday party or something, and I really wanted to have a birthday party, and we hadn't set anything up. And he was like, well, I never got birthday parties as a kid. Like, why do you need one? And I'm just like, yeah, have a little girl. Girls are different than boys, and you know, whatever. Yeah. It is what it is. So we were raised a little differently.
I can't imagine, not that it is an excuse for it or it was okay at all, but to do what he did for a living and be in that high stress.
Yeah.
Where literally every day you're going and your life is on the line.
Yeah.
Or the things that you're seeing.
He's been
from
attacked at the prison
the
before.
most evil types of people.
Yeah.
And to come home and be able to say, I'm leaving that at work and I'm not bringing it into my household. So
I think that is an important acknowledgement because you're on full guard. Your nervous system is on high alert to survive. Yeah. He had been attacked at the prison before. He got hit over the head. He had a concussion. He had it's, the whole thing. And you're literally protecting your life to go home, to make it home to your family. Yeah. And then to come home and then to be soft. Right. After all of that. And then now you're going right back into it.
Exactly.
I can't imagine. And that's a lot that actually a lot of change that I noticed after he retired.
Big time.
Because he was
we
able
both saw it.
To take that weight off and be soft. And so it's fun to see him smile and laugh. And I remember there was something that Daniel said. He's like, Nia, you got your dad back. Yeah. Once I was like, my dad's we're in such a good place. Yeah. And I was like, I think I got the dad that I never knew before he worked at a prison. I got a new dad. This, all the things. Okay.
I think, when he said, I love you or whatever, and it was I don't know when's the last time I heard that.
Yeah, I didn't hear that a lot growing up.
Yeah.
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 But now he says it all the time. So that's great. We're in a good place. Well, I do not want to pause this episode, but we're going to have to take a little pause. This will be part 1. Make sure you stay tuned next week for part 2 because we have so many stories and a lot of really good takeaways. So make sure you stay tuned next week on the Hold My Crown podcast. See you guys later. Bye.
Peace and God bless.
Yay Media Group.